the crisis in Ukraine. Russia is in control of Crimea, and tonight President Obama will depart for Europe to try and solidify support against Vladimir Putin. I spoke earlier to Mike Rogers, Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He was in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. Chairman Rogers, welcome back to the program. I want to get to the crisis in Ukraine. You've been there in just a minute, but let me start with Flight 370. You said last week that based on the people you're talking to in our intelligence community, you think, unfortunately, this plane is at the bottom of the ocean. Is that your view this morning?
I think that's the highest probability, David. You can't take anything quite off the list yet, but when you look at what is probable and what is plausible, it certainly rates as the probable. So what they'll continue to do is try to identify every background on every passenger to make sure they're not missing something, and then they won't be really able to put this whole case together until they find the aircraft. And I do believe, based on everything that I've seen so far, it is likely and probable that it crashed into the Indian Ocean.
As you have been in Ukraine and are thinking about Vladimir Putin and Russia, the mission of U.S. intelligence is to think about what happens next. So what is President Putin going to do next?
Well, that's the big mystery, but I will tell you that the Ukrainians passionately believe that he will be on the move again in Ukraine, especially in the east. And we have to think, I think we're a bit removed from this, David. I talked to an individual who was kidnapped by the Russians, he believes. His ear was cut off. He had nails put in his hand in a crucifix type of position in order to get a confession from him that the Americans were behind the upheaval in Ukraine. And this is who we're dealing with. So they took over Crimea. You see that they've taken over another base yet today. And it certainly appears, by everything that Ukrainian intelligence officials believe, certainly U.S. intelligence officials believe, that Putin is not done in Ukraine. And so it is very troubling. He's put all military units he would need to move into Ukraine on its eastern border, and is doing exercises. We see him moving forces in the south in a position where they could take the southern region over to Moldova in the Ukraine, and we see that he's actually working what they call soft power. So he's got intelligence officials spread out all over the country causing problems in Ukraine.
Do you think President Obama has done enough to stop him?
Listen, I think Americans are so far removed from this. We need to re-engage in what is actually happening. You have individuals who are for independence and their own personal liberty fighting against a country that wants to take them over. And one of the reasons they took to the streets in the beginning was corruption, oppressive corruption. I do think that we have to, as Americans, have to take a tough stand with our European partners. There are things that we can do that I think we're not doing. I don't think the rhetoric matches the reality on the ground. You can do non-combatant military aid in a way that allows them to defend themselves, and that's all they want. No direct military action. They don't want U.S. boots on the ground. Neither do I. I don't think you do either, nor does any other American. But what we can do is offer them things that they can use to really protect and defend themselves. And I think that sends a very clear message. We're not talking about even complicated weapons systems. We're talking about small arms so they can protect themselves, maybe medical supplies, radio equipment, things that they can use to protect themselves, defensive posture weapon systems. And you do that in conjunction with sanctions. Now you've got something that says, Mr. Putin, we're done with you expanding into other countries. He goes to bed at night thinking of Peter the Great, and he wakes up thinking of Stalin. We need to understand who he is and what he wants. It may not fit with what we believe of the 21st century, but that's not who he is, and that's not what he's trying to accomplish. We need to be a little bit tougher with this, with Putin, or he is going to continue to take territory to fulfill what he believes is rightfully Russia. He gave a very inflammatory speech last Tuesday that concerned certainly the people of the Ukraine all across this region of the world, the European Union, and it should concern the United States as well.
Is a red line for the United States, in your judgment, our NATO allies, particularly the Baltics, if Russia should cross that line?
Well, I think we need to act before that. I think it's too late. If he crosses into the Baltics with military units, that is more than troubling. That means that Georgia, the country of Georgia, is likely had been more further invaded than it already is. It means that he's taken land in the Ukraine, the southern and eastern portions of Ukraine before I think he would do the Baltics. So if it gets to the Baltics, we have allowed people who want to be free, who want to be independent, who want to have self-determination, and we've turned our back and walked away from them. You know, the world did that once, and it was a major catastrophe.
I want to touch on a couple of other areas quickly. On the issue of the NSA surveillance and Edward Snowden, when you were last on this program, Chairman, you were very pointed, suggesting that he may have had help from the Russians, that Edward Snowden may have been a Russian spy, may be a Russian spy. He's called that absurd. No new details have come to light on this. Were you irresponsible in making such a charge without having specific evidence to back it up, to just sort of float that out there?
Well, first of all, I see all the intelligence and all the evidence from everything from his activities leading up to this event to very suspicious activity during the event. And so when you talk to the folks who are doing the investigation, they cannot rule it out. So here's what we know, David. We know today no counterintelligence official in the United States does not believe that Mr. Snowden, the NSA contractor, is not under the influence of Russian intelligence services. We believe he is. I certainly believe he is today. So now we all agree that he's under the influence of Russian intelligence services today. You know, for the investigators, they need to figure out, well, when did that influence start? And was he interested in cooperating earlier than the timeline would suggest? So you're talking to a guy who stole information, who is now in the arms of intelligence services, saying, well, gosh, whatever you guys say is absurd. Only I can define the truth. That's ridiculous on its face. I do believe there's more to this story. He is under the influence of Russian intelligence officials today. He's actually supporting, in an odd way, this very activity of brazen brutality and expansionism of Russia. He needs to understand that. And I think Americans need to understand that. We need to put it in proper context.
But what is the evidence that he is under that influence? As he has pointed out, why go to Hong Kong? When he originally got to Russia, he was stranded in the airport. That's no way to treat a spy, he has pointed out. So you're arguing a lot, but where's the evidence to suggest that he's actually under the influence of a foreign intelligence agency?
Well, again, today we believe he's under the influence, and every counterintelligence official believes that. You won't find one that doesn't believe today he's under the influence of Russian intelligence services. That we can all agree on. It's when did that start that I think there is really good evidence. In this case, the more that we look into this, I think the more you're going to find that that date gets further and further away from his story. Matter of fact, I don't believe the story he tells about both the airport or his activities in Hong Kong are accurate. It just gets more complicated. And as I said, he's clearly in Moscow under the influence of intelligence services for a country that is expanding its borders today using military force. I think there's a lot more questions that need to be answered here.
We're going to leave it there. Chairman Rogers, thank you as always.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Our roundtable is here now. David